Hello and welcome to Fats on Film. I am your host, Hannah Ogilvie, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things fat representation in film, TV, and wider media. Now, this week I have my guest, writer and director of film and TV, and author of the non-fiction book Fat Girl Best Friend. It's Sarah Grant. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. This is the ultimate podcast that I want to be on, so I'm so excited.
Literally, oh my God. So, you know, what is so interesting about how I found you was my sister-in-law. I don't know if she even listens to this podcast. I don't think she's a podcast girly, but if Kat, you are listening, hello. She saw, because she lives up in Glasgow, and I think you were doing an event near Glasgow, where I think you might have been doing a reading of your new book, Fat Girl Best Friend. And she messaged me going, "You'd be really into this." And I was like, click. They're like, "Oh my God, we're thinking about the same things. Other people are talking about the things we want to talk about." So that's when I dropped you a message asking if this would be something you'd be interested in talking about further on the podcast.
So much more, yeah. So Fat Girl Best Friend is my first book. I predominantly work in film and television, but I always wanted to write. I always wanted to write books. I was 3 years into an English degree when I found out that I was dyslexic.
Of course.
I should pivot. It's a wee cheeky pivot. But no, it was really great to be able to release a book. And Fat Girl Best Friend is just about comparing plus size women in film and television and the characters that we play, because we're such a rare commodity that you kind of, sometimes it can just be seen as just this bonus, this amazing plus if you see a plus size person, like a fat person in it being represented at all, but it's only when you actually like take them out of context and line them up together, you kind of see these ugly tropes arising. And as I started in my practice changing from going purely behind the camera to doing some work where I was in front of the camera, I realized that the only roles I was being seen for was the sassy sidekick or the insipid wallflower of the best friend. No one was ever interested in seeing me for any kind of leading part or romantic lead. So I was like, I think there's more to explore here. So yeah, that's Fat Girl Best Friend. It came out in July, and I think the Glasgow event must have been the book launch. It was one of the best nights of my life.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, everything you've spoken about is things that we explored on this podcast, like the tropes that whoever the powers that be believe that only fat people can satisfy. So yeah, those fat best friends or the sassy sidekicks or like even like sages, the people who give advice, but never the main character. And, you know, if you think about representation, how important representation is to how people view themselves and, you know, the paths that they believe is possible for them. If you're constantly being fed, you are not the main character. Well, what's that going to do for your psyche? You know, what's that going to do for your boundaries? Like, how much of a people pleaser could that make you? Because that's what you're constantly being reinforced.
So much so. I remember, like, when thinking about it and having to kind of reflect on my own experiences, I remember how much effort and value I put into the fact that I was funny, that I was a comedic person. And I think it's because I realized, or I felt that I had to earn my place within my friendship group. I had to provide value beyond just being myself. I had to make them laugh. I had to make them want to be around me. And I think that's because, like, we are told that we're never the main character. So other people who are main characters, these thin leads are having a big emotional moment, and that is very valid. And whatever I was going through wasn't really valid enough. So I kind of had to be like, I need to stay relevant. I need to stay important in you. So I need to give you more. And yeah, the people pleasing, I feel that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I see it a lot. I see it a lot on social media when I I follow a lot of fat content creators, curate your social media feed to who you need to see. Don't fall down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I follow a lot of fat content creators, and it, again, that unfortunately just feels like such a universal experience because, to your point, if you're not going to provide, I don't know, the good looks, and I'm using air quotes, good looks to the group, and you're not going to attract the men to the group, then you have to give something. You have to serve in some way. Like, your personality isn't enough. So yeah, being the funny one, or being like the constant designated driver. Maybe you're the one who's always at the end of the phone if someone wants to have a moan about their boyfriend. Even though you've never been in a relationship yourself, like all of these tropes, they're tropes, yes, in media, but they do become a reality because that's just all we think we're meant to be. Mm-hmm. And so, I think we are talking about it more and more, like, things like your book, like this podcast, we're discussing fat representation more and more, and the impact it therefore has on like people's true and real lives. But I'm so happy that we are having this conversation more and more, because if you think back to when you were younger, Sarah, no one was talking about fat representation.
Oh no, the way that I kind of describe my upbringing was, has anyone else been personally victimized by the 90s and noughties? Like,
yes. Here she is.
It's the gaslighting of size 10, Renée Zellweger for Bridget Jones was fat, please. Or like Kim Cattrall for Sex and the City, just like, whether it's so not only were people talking about this kind of positive representation, we were being made fun of even when like fat was attributed a moral value and not a neutral describer. And it was like the mere presence of a fat body, like Fat Monica and Friends, the most witty joke that you can totally tell them when the first time she appears, it's meant to be a one-time joke, but they just kept bringing her back out. And then it was the laziest writing. And like, I could talk a lot about Friends, but a lot of things I was like, oh, some of this for its time was like really progressive, and how it showed like, women, being professionals and looking after themselves. There's a lot that you could say about it, but at the same time, the way it treated fat people and queer people, God, it was like so far in the other direction. And that's what we were exposed to. So I'm like,
that's like ultimately it. And I guess that's, to our own horns here. That's why we're speaking about what we're speaking. That's why we want the listeners to be listening, because we want to like dismantle and dissect those representations and, kind of shine a light on the lies that we've been told, like you say, that fatness has some kind of moral value, or that we're just some kind of joke, that we're not to be taken seriously. It's so important.
I think for us, being more just in terms of the work that we do, puts us in a more kind of analytical headspace when it comes to consuming media, because we all consume media. But if you are not someone who works in this industry and stuff, which most people don't, then they're probably going to be seeing things, feeling things, internalizing things without any of the kind of analytical tools that we which we have because of the jobs that we do, to be able to go, that's actually not right. So it is great that we're talking about this, because most people don't have those tools to be able to go, hang on, I am trained to pick up this and identify a trope and understand how it makes me feel. Whereas there's going to be people who are just going to still feel horrible because of everything that they watch, which is the same as what we did. So it is great we get to talk about it more.
It's great we get to talk about it. And on that, well, let's get into it. So this episode, we're going to talk about Stranger Things. Stranger Things is a sci-fi horror show for Netflix, developed by the Duffer Brothers, and the first season premiered on the 15th of July 2016. I cannot believe it was that long ago.
Wow.
And we've had 4 seasons so far. The 5th and final season is coming out at some point. Who knows when. It's an ensemble cast. So you have the younger guys and the younger kids, and then you've got the adults. So you've got Winona Ryder, absolute diamond. Winona Ryder. You've got David Harbour, Finn Wolfhard, Millie Bobby Brown, Gaten Matarazzo, Kayla McLaughlin, Natalia Dyer, Charlie Heaton. You got Matthew Modine for a couple seasons, Noah Schnapp. You got Sadie Sink, Joe Keery, Sean Astin, who we will talk about more in a bit, Paul Reiser, Maya Hawke, Priya Ferguson, and Brett Gelman. Nominated for a bunch of awards, including Golden Globes and Primetime Emmys throughout its run. And Sarah, can you give us a plot synopsis of Stranger Things?
Sure. So with the Stranger Things, I think that it really mined into the nostalgia value. So it went straight for the 80s aesthetic and tried to tell you a story that we've all seen before that's comforting. So we have these 4 little misfit boys who are like in the kind of American suburbs, always on their bikes, playing D&D, having a really kind of wholesome time in the small town of Hawkins. And everything starts to go a little bit upside down when one of the subjects, a test subject with magical powers, a little girl called 11, just identified by her number, escapes from the Hawkins lab and makes her way to Hawkins town in general, and comes across these boys who kind of look after her and take care of her. And because of her powers, she is pursued very highly by these kind of government black sedan type, like very general baddies. We have seen it before, but it is very comforting. And what kind of happens is the boys are at the age that they're keeping things from their parents, so the parents don't understand why strange things are happening. Look, bad pun, strange things in the town. And it turns out that Hawkins sits on top of a rift in a kind of space-time continuum. It sits above a parallel world that they colloquially call the Upside Down, and there are spaces where there are gaps opening between our world and the Upside Down, which is a kind of monster-filled shadow version of our world. And 11 has the power to close these gaps, but since these gaps are open, monsters are coming through and escaping, and the boys need to protect 11 from the people who are trying to take her back to the lab and continue experimenting on her, and also find her a home, a family, and also defeat the evil monsters that are invading the small town of Hawkins.
That's it. That's it in a nutshell. And we've had 4 seasons of this.
That's the premise. Season 1. It goes places. Shenanigans happen.
Yeah. Shenanigans, and new villains come in and they come back out again. Other countries get involved.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We can't have an 80s American suburb film without some Cold War nostalgic fear.
Please, let's just have a Russian base under the wall. Why not?
We can't do anything without being scared of the Russians. The concept of Russia.
Yeah, just a general, like, yeah, exactly. The whole country's out to get you.
Yes.
Let's just start from the very beginning then. Sarah, do you like Stranger Things?
I really like Stranger Things. I really like that it had. I think it started something really new. I mean, nostalgia is a huge thing that is being mined just now, but I think it's because we live in a horrible place. The world is. It's a really antagonistic place for so many people. We have cost of living crisis. We have so many difficult things happening in our world just now. And I kind of feel that there's a crying out for comfort, especially from the pandemic. I mean, watching figures for things like The Royal Family on BBC and Gavin and Stacey, these properties that ended tens of years ago, all went through this massive resurgence because everyone's looking for comfort. And I think there's an element of looking back to the classics and wanting a simpler time. And I really like that as a starting place to then be able to play with aesthetics. I think Stranger Things also inspired things like Sex Education, which is a contemporary story with a period drama production design. And it's just, I really like how it's quite innovative. I think there's definitely some bits that I don't like. But one thing I will say is that I kind of feel that Stranger Things from season to season is a fan-led piece. When you saw, one thing that really bothered me specifically about season 2 was the lack of female friendship. There were no female friendships, no women were talking to each other, and which was really upsetting. It was just a case you had these great girl characters who were just hanging on after the boys, and there was a huge outcry, especially between Elle and Max. And then in season 3 there was this huge story pivot where they became best friends. And I have a feeling that a lot of things kind of came from that. I also know that from the first season there came about the hashtag, which we're going to talk about, Justice for Barb. And then I kind of feel that going forward, the Barb storyline, or like the importance of Barb, was like played into almost like retrospectively. I kind of feel like the outcry, and then they had to try and find a way to give it importance in further seasons because they've ruined it. Like they missed the trick. And I kind of feel that they actually do that, which I'm not really a fan of, like, you know, fans having the kind of power over the creators. I'm not really a fan of fan-led shows. It's a little bit fan servicey. However, it has led to some improvements, specifically in female friendship representation and justice for Barb.
And justice for Barb. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. So I'm not the biggest Stranger Things fan, I will say, and I know I'm in the minority. I know that's not the common opinion. I'm just one of these people who I think if it was just one season, it would be like one of the best shows we've ever seen in our lives.
Oh, I'm with you.
Yeah, but because they clearly didn't plan. They clearly didn't plan what was going to happen next. And
no,
I find season 2 boring because it's the exact same as season 1. I don't even remember season 3 apart from like the big monster in the mall. And then season 4, it's good and then it's not so good. So I will watch it because my partner really likes it. He's like, say about nostalgia. My partner loves the nostalgia. He loves the look of it. And obviously the music's amazing.
Yeah.
But am I a plot girly? Maybe I am. But I think the story isn't the strongest piece, and I just struggle with that. But on that note, I have seen it all, so I have something to talk about here. But let's go into the reason why we're talking about it on this podcast when we talk about fat representation. So we're going to talk about 3 different characters, and we're going to start with Barb Holland, who you've already kind of mentioned. So Barb Holland is Nancy's best friend. Oh, funny that. I feel like we were setting this up early, weren't we? We got a plus-size best friend into the group. And it looks like that Nancy and Barb are drifting when we first meet them, because Nancy, she is this gorgeous woman, stereotypically gorgeous, small frame, getting the eye from the really hot guy in school. And Nancy's kind of leaving behind her plus-size long-term best friend. And poor Barb, she's trying so hard to keep relevant. So she is the designated driver, right? So Nancy rings her at one point to ask if she would drive her to the party. So, which is, I think, what's his name? Steve. Steve is hosting the big house.
Harrington.
Yeah. What a good-looking man. We'll just say that.
What a good-looking man.
And as they go to the party, and Nancy's getting a bit drunk, and she's like pressuring Barb to get involved, but Barb isn't really comfortable with it. These are not her friends, they're her friends' friends. She doesn't feel comfortable. And then Nancy decides she's going to go up to the bedroom and, do what teenage girls do, and tells Barb to go home, but Barb doesn't go because she feels so loyal to her friend, but her friend doesn't feel that loyalty back. And the upside down happens, or the Demogorgon comes and grabs her and pulls her into the upside down. And I rewatched that scene in prep for this show, this episode. And Shannon Purser, who plays Barb, her performance as she's getting dragged into the pool at school. Oh, it really is a horror moment.
Yeah.
And we see that she's been dragged into the upside down. And she's actually our first character to die in this show. And well, what are your thoughts on Barb when you first meet her? Like, do you like her? Are you intrigued by her? Do you want to know more about Barb?
Well, of course I want to know more about Barb. I know absolutely nothing about her. Her first line in the show is to sidle up to Nancy and say, "Did he call yet?" Establishing straight away that we're going to be talking about Nancy now. And then that is what happens. Barb doesn't have any wants of her own. Actually, she doesn't say at any point that she doesn't want to go to the party. It's all about Nancy. And when they do go to the party and they are parking up, and Nancy's changing into something a little sluttier, because we've all done that. We've all done that. Hike the skirt up, no shaming here. But when Barb is kind of saying, "I'm not sure what it is that you're doing here," and she also says, "Nancy, you're not that stupid," because Nancy's like, "I'm just going have some fun," and Barb's like, "You're not this dumb. Like, you know exactly what you're doing." And this is the thing that really hurts me, is that Nancy does know exactly what she's doing. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's putting herself outside of her comfort zone, and she's bringing Barb along because Barb is her safety net. And as soon as she decides that she's happy to go beyond her comfort zone, then Barb no longer matters. It was never about protecting Barb, whereas Barb is always protecting Nancy.
Yeah.
And I'm just like a little bit, okay, that did not need to happen. That could have happened another way. It would have been way more interesting, because obviously Barb's death sets up the whole series. And I find it really interesting because I'm really interested in horror and women in horror, specifically in the concept of the final girl. And the final girl is usually at the end of the slasher movie, the only one alive. And usually they are studious and virginal. And it's usually sex by death happens to everyone else around her. So when you think about it, it should have been Barb that should have been the final girl. But it's not. Nancy becomes a kind of version of the final girl. Nancy, which this is one thing I love about Nancy's character, is that when put in a situation, Nancy finds out that she has a natural propensity to be extremely brave. Like, I just love the idea of this, like, you know, girl next door character when put into the line of fire is like, no, I'm actually a badass and I can handle things, which is great. But did her best friend literally have to die to set her off on this journey? And even then, the journey doesn't happen to, the journey isn't to find Barb's killer and to get revenge. It's that I think there's a monster. So it's more, it's happenstance. It only really gets the weight of Barb died and there needs to be justice in the later seasons after the outcry. So there's not really much I can say about Barb apart from the fact that she is literally sacrificed. I mean, and we've seen this trope so many times in young adult before. I think it's very easy to see a direct comparison is Saoirse Ronan and Beanie Feldstein in Lady Bird and Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird is that Saoirse Ronan is wanting to be with the rich, cool, popular kids, and the first thing she does is say to her best friend Julie when she sits down and goes, here's your packed lunch that my mum made you. She goes, no, I'm on a diet, even though she's thin, and that's it. And instantly the cut is there and we see how she's going to do that. She's going to leave behind her world and the representation of the world that she doesn't want to be anymore because it's lame and it's beneath her as a fat girl. And that just really annoys me. So it's not the first time that we have seen the thin lead sacrifice her friend in order to elevate her social standing.
Yes.
Which is always a fat girl. And in this case, Barb is literally sacrificed. Bothers me.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That trope of, if you want to elevate your status, if you want to be taken more seriously in just being the popularity contest, which is school, then you have to graduate from your plus size friend because they're almost like dragging you down, right? And then it's interesting that the Stranger Things goes that one step further to actually kill Barb, so Nancy's not going to have this, and I apologize for the pun here, this dead weight around Nancy's ankles anymore, because Nancy needs to progress to the Steve the Hare Harrington's level. And then not only that, does it become it does become a catalyst for Nancy eventually, because in season 2, like you say, after the whole hashtag justice for Barb, Nancy is a lot more hot on to this idea of we need to get something, give the parents some closure on Barb, because the parents, the police have told the parents that Barb was just a runaway because the men in suits, as you mentioned earlier, they've taken the car and they've dumped it somewhere else. And apparently all girls just happen to run away with none of their shit in the car. That makes perfect sense. And so the parents think, they hope that means Barb will come home one day. Yeah. And I think it's interesting when that scene happens, when you see Nancy and Steve, I think it's more Nancy, she has that kind of guilt across her face as she's like, oh my God, we have to do something. And they're at the table with Barb's parents, and Barb's dad's a fat person and the mum is smaller, and they're having KFC. Now I appreciate in the 80s, I think KFC was like the new thing, it was the hot new thing. So there's probably a little bit of novelty around having a KFC at that time, but it also wasn't lost on me that we have a fat family. At least 2 out of these 3 members were larger people, and they are now having fast food. I was like, do we really hammer that home?
I'm pretty sure that's the only time you ever see fast food, because a lot of the parents, a lot of the mums, through different points in the season have little bits of kind of midlife crisis of being trapped in the 50s nostalgia of keeping a home and of keeping a home, having a part-time job and looking after their families, and they all have crises. I mean, Nancy's mum has this whole thing where she thinks about having an affair with Billy because she's always making the dinner. So every other person you see is at home because they're all mums, like, because we're following these children, like they were following the story of these children and their surrounding environment, which is their parents included. And we see them all having these home cooked meals, and hi Mikey, are you staying for dinner? But then we go to Barb's family and they get KFC.
Yeah, so really good. It was just a point where I was like, oh, like, okay, we get it. Like, you're trying to hammer home that they're unhealthy and blah, blah, blah. But it's just such dated references.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it leans into another idea that all fat people are like subject to physical ineptitude, that they're completely unable of doing things physically, like, you know, running or like anything. They are just like, if any sort of like needs to be physical happens, you would think they would fall down. So they can't cook apparently. But also think about how many encounters with the upside down that every other character had.
I was literally, your thought was leading me to my thought. Yeah, I was thinking, hold on. You know, Will's managed to survive, and he's what, maybe like an 11-year-old in the upside down for X amount of weeks by this point, or days, I have no idea. And then Barb dies straight away? What? Can she not fight?
She's one of the only characters that, because you see straight away how big the danger is. The danger is that because you see it rip into Barb. You see that this monster is dangerous, and she never stood a chance. However, they're like, right, this is the level, this is the monster, you don't stand a chance. And yet every other character, like, you know, so from the 4 kids, or the 5 kids, including Elle, and then, like, you know, the older generation, so Nancy, Jonathan, Steve, they all have multiple encounters. All of them have multiple encounters with creatures from the upside down, with the lab, with these monsters, and they survive every time. Barb is like the only one, except another character we're going to talk about, only that die on the first time. And it's
literally Sarah. As soon as you said that, I was like, "But babe, it's not." And I'm like, "Oh, and these 2 characters have something in common." Like, oh my god! Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, when you lay it out like this, isn't it just so obvious?
Yeah,
isn't it just so obvious why they choose these characters? And even like, I mean, I this is no disrespect to Barb, because I actually love Barb's fashion sense, but you can tell it's meant to be frumpy. You know, it's meant to be a little bit, I don't know, again, no disrespect to my old ladies, but a little bit old lady. You know, it's not meant to be fashion forward. And I'm like, why?
And the giant glasses, the giant
I love that.
Head to toe, always in her that. And I think Sharon Mercer has got a beautiful body. She is like, she rocks it. She rocks everything that she wears. But again, she's constantly covered from head to toe. And then you have teeny tiny Nancy, like, just like, I'm gonna hike my skirt higher, yay! And I'm shotgun a beer. Like, god damn. Like, it is so obvious, because even when you, like, I'm not going to count it now, but think about the ensembleness of the ensemble cast. There's 4 boys and Elle, and then afterwards there's Max. So then there's that. There's the older siblings in the group, which is like another 3 or 4. If you bring in like Robin from Scoop Troop, then that's another person. You have all of the mums. You've got the little sisters as well. You've got Lucas's little sister. You've got the bullies. You've got the parents. You've got Hopper, Joyce, and then the kind of surrounding characters around the lab as well. That is a huge returning cast, like maybe 40 strong, 2 plus
possibly
all that 2. It's ridiculous.
Am I wrong in thinking in the season 4, when we get introduced to the new D&D club that's ran by whatever his name is?
Oh, Eddie.
Yeah, is there a big guy in that group that gets like no lines?
I don't remember. Probably, actually. I don't remember. Like, and I watched recently.
I'm gonna have to like look up myself and probably like change this in editing to prove whether I'm right or wrong. But yeah, I have a feeling, and again, like, if knowing the tropes that we do, and the tropes are, you know, fat, nerdy, antisocial, and introverted, that's a D&D. They'd be playing D&D, right? That's why all the other boys play D&D, because they're all a bit awkward and geeky and nerdy. Yeah. You throw a fat guy in there, they're not going to look out of place. No, but exactly. I'm wondering if there is one, but they haven't given the guy any lines, no actual story arc, and he's just there for furniture, you know?
I love it. Can you imagine? I mean, everyone went so mad for the character of Eddie, and again, I am so I do love the whole thing of like, look at this teen drama and everyone's in their mid-20s, but this guy was 40. I'm sorry.
I'm going to get myself some haters here because I really didn't get the Eddie love.
No, me neither.
Oh, thank God. Oh, God, friends. Thank you.
I don't know why.
I didn't get it. That's no disrespect to the actor. Like, you get your bag. But the character, I was just, I don't get why everyone, like, loves him. I just think, like, he's just another one. Like, I was happy that they actually killed him off.
Yes.
Because the show, which again comes back to Barb again, has a really bad habit of killing people and then bringing them back. Like, immediately.
Yeah.
So as much as that really annoys me, that trope, and I'm annoyed they didn't do that for Barb.
Yeah.
At the same time, I am happy. I really do hope Eddie stays dead and he doesn't come back in the next season. So I'm scared, again, going back to you're saying that they're kind of led by the fans. They know there's been such a fan reaction to Eddie. Do they think, like, oh, well, we'll bank on that and bring, is it Adrian Quinn? Is that his name?
Yes.
Back. Yeah.
I think it would not surprise me, especially kind of supernatural elements and stuff. It very much reminds me of like a last season of Buffy, where like you've got the first evil who can take the form of anyone who's dead, and that was just a final season gimmick to be able to bring back characters, like bring back the villains from before, and like give them a little bit and stuff. But it was very fan servicey. It was the last season going for so long. It was a ham sandwich, and everybody loved it. But I'm just like, but when I think about Eddie, and I'm just like, he's like, oh yeah, he's just like, everyone thinks he's weird and no one really likes him. And I'm like, but the guy's buff as anything. The guy's buff. He's scary. He's clad in leather, and like he like runs D&D, and everyone thinks he's a low-key psycho and that he deals a little bit. Like all those things. I'm like, why isn't this guy a fat guy? Like that guitar. If this was just this fat guy on top of a caravan playing the guitar, it would have been an incredible. It would have had so much more. I don't want to use the word weight, but it would have been to me. I think not even just for like representation. I think it would have been so much more honest having this guy, because again, everyone's like, oh, everyone hates this psycho guy, and I'm like, I'm sorry, he's too pretty for everyone to call him a psycho.
Yeah, far too pretty. Far too pretty.
You want someone that these jocks genuinely think like, I can go after and I can kill this person. That's not this guy. They don't know this. They can take this guy in a fight. Like, I think he should have been this like older kind of like, just like a bad, fat, sweaty stereotype that you actually got to know, and just a case of he's actually a badass. That's what I wanted to see. Not like the dangerous 30-year-old playing a 17-year-old.
Absolutely. So talking about the hashtag justice for Barb, Shannon Purser's even said that, she knows that Barb wasn't meant to be a big deal, literally in for maybe 1 or 2 episodes of season 1. And the Duffer Brothers they admit they didn't go into great detail about the character since the focus was on finding Will. And again, you see that in the story, like there's a school assembly for like, prayers for Will. And like, where's the prayers for Barb? For fuck's sake. But a lot of the fans spoke out, saying like, hashtag justice for Barb. And Laura Bradley from Vanity Fair, she suggested that Barb would be a similar misfit in society and looks, and this is her quote, looks more like someone you might actually meet in real life compared to the other characters, particularly Nancy. I'm like, yes. Yeah. Yes, she does. She just looks like a normal person. She's someone you would know in your neighborhood. She's someone you'd know in your class. Yeah. So much more approachable and relatable than your Hollywood starlets. Now, I get this is a drama, and I get, like, the whole point is like everyone looks elevated. Everyone looks like, it's Winona Ryder's in the cast. You know what I mean? But it's frustrating when they're trying to force down this idea, going back to the Eddie thing, they're trying to force relatability onto characters or people who look like superstars. Yeah. There's only so far that they can push that. Anyway, so yeah, the hashtags, I'm with Barb and Justice for Barb, and several sites and forums were created to support her. Like, I can imagine the Tumblrs being all over Barb, and then as you said earlier, that fed into then the storyline for Nancy going into season 2 and beyond. Because that's how it's not directly, but that's kind of how Murray gets involved, because they approach Murray on helping with the conspiracy theory against the big bads, and to get evidence for Barb's family so they could move on.
Yeah, and that's how they end up in some sort of Russian conspiracy, all because they had a character that was started far too early.
Yeah, I totally agree. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Barb?
Not just a case of it's a shame, and because I think that even Netflix, I kind of feel like it's funny because Shannon Purser was so underrated. I genuinely do think that it led directly into her being cast as the lead role in Sierra Burgess' A Loser, which was meant to be you wanted to see this person, this relatable person, this everyday person in a high school movie and stuff, and it was just the worst thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, it was just I won't go into it, but again, it's very funny. It reminds me of when Barbie came out, Mattel or the film critics were like, oh my god, we need to be making more films about toys for nostalgia. And people are like, no, you need to make more films by women for women. That's kind of what I feel like. It's a case of oh, you want Barb? Here, have Sierra Burgess as A Loser. And I'm like, I cannot begin to tell you how much that isn't what we wanted.
Yeah, so I guess our lasting message then on Barb and Shannon Purser is cash Shannon Purser and better stuff. We'd love to see more of her. Get her face on our screen. Absolutely. She has a character that lasts 2 episodes, and look at the legacy she's left. It's unreal. What an impact.
Exactly. That's goals.
Oh, literally. All right, let's move on to season 2. So we've done season 1, we're going to season 2, and we are introduced to a new character. He is Bob Newby, played by the legendary Sean Astin, and he is Joyce's love interest for this season. And we understand that Bob Newby, they knew each other at school, but Bob was part of the geeky group, and he's actually the one who campaigned to start the AV club that the boys now love. And it's just I love that little connection. That's so cute. But Joyce was the popular one at school, so she didn't really notice Bob at school. And then you've also got Hopper, who was also at school with him, but he's a bit of a jock. So you've got that kind of still existing school dynamic between the 3 of them to a certain extent, especially between Hopper and Bob. And Bob, he is the store manager of Radio Shack. He loves the technology. He's clearly got a super clever way of viewing the world and viewing puzzles. He's a problem solver. He's clearly very intelligent, and he's also brave as fuck.
Oh, brave.
So brave. And unfortunately, I don't even know what episode it is, but towards the end of the season, he is the one holding back the gates, trying to get everyone out of the Hawkins laboratory when there's these demi-dogs running around. And as he makes his break for safety, a demi-dog grabs him, and then he just gets mauled to death while Joyce... It is disgustingly violent. While Joyce is screaming and Hopper is dragging her away. Bob Newby, superhero.
Bob Newby, superhero. Oh.
Superhero. Tell me your thoughts on Bob.
Okay, I love Bob. I mean, I think again this leans into the things that I expected from myself growing up. I was such a Lord of the Rings girly growing up. I never read the books. I really struggle with them. I'm dyslexic and I really struggle with Tolkien's writing, but my dad was such a fan, and it was almost there was a disappointment that I couldn't read the books. He was kind of disappointed in me. So we got to share films. We got to share the love of films with them. But I love that. I mean, the way I kind of talk about when you're a girl when you fancy Legolas, and then you realize you're a woman when you realize it's Aragorn all along. But for me,
so true.
I know, it's just very much how do you separate the boys from the men? I remember saying, even when everyone in my school was oh my god, either in love with Legolas, and then we got to a certain point being so Legolas is Aragorn we fancy. We've clearly just all had an awakening of some sort. I remember being no, Sam's my ride or die. So anything Sean Astin is in, I am obsessed with. So I love seeing him come there. It's really funny that you kind of said about the high school dynamic between them, because what I love about Bob is that he kind of has that high school like nervousness around Joyce. He goes, I can't believe I get to kiss Joyce. I get to be with Joyce, as if he's undeserving of this woman who is a car crash. He's like, this woman is a car crash, and he's the manager of a store. So it's a case of like, I'm sorry, you're the much more financially stable person. However, you think that you're undeserving. But what I love about Bob is that we never get to see any sort of insecurity he has towards Hopper. You'd think that Hopper's around, he'd start getting like, possessive and something, but he's like, Jim, how are you? How can I help? Are you okay? But it's Hopper that's being a bit bitchy. Hopper's like, saying to Joyce, like, how's things with Bob the Brain? And I'm like, what a bullying thing. And Joyce is kind of like almost laughing, like, I know I'm dating a geek now. And I'm just like, okay, you two are, this is really crappy of the two of you, especially when all he does is support both of you, when he has no reason to historically. So I just think, not only is he just a superhero, he's just such a nice guy, and he's so supportive, and he's like, and even when Jonathan and Will are so tired of him because he's just so cringe, like, I just,
with the Halloween.
Yes, like, I hope it doesn't suck. Oh, dress what a little angel. But at the same time, it's really like, he's not fazed by the two of them. He's not trying to, like, be this macho man and lay down boundaries. He's like, I'm here for you in whatever way that you want. And I think the boys who have had such an unstable upbringing, like, crave that stability, and he's that for him. And I just loved seeing that, and I hate that it was exploited. But yeah, no, Bob, ride or die.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a really good summation of his character. He is a sweet baby angel, and there's a really good scene, probably one of like Bob's standout scenes, where he's driving Will to school, I believe, and he doesn't know everything. So this is the frustration thing about Bob, and I don't necessarily blame Joyce, because I understand, but she keeps him in the dark about what happened to Will last year, and so his point of view is that Will's really struggling with nightmares. That's his point of view. So he's like, well, okay, well, I have experience, because we've all had nightmares. They're really scary. So he thinks, hey, I'll just give Will a bit of a pep talk, and he does that. Stand your ground, tell them no more, and because he kind of gives his own memory of a nightmare he had of a clown when he was younger, very a la Pennywise, and Will takes it in. Will is just listening to him, going like, yeah, maybe I just need to stand my ground against the mind flayer. That's all I have to do. But actually, unbeknownst to Bob, it's the worst advice he could have given, because it means that the mind flayer then actually does possess Will, and then lead to the events of the last half of the season. And I wanted to get your thoughts over whether, do you believe the writers hold Bob responsible for that bad advice, and therefore that's their reasoning for killing Bob as punishment?
I think they might. I think if he was someone that they wanted to stick around, then they would have. Because it's Stranger Things. I mean, how many like scenes have we got of had the crap bit out of him, Hopper, doing the whole I'm still getting up and standing. Like, I think that the writers, and I think like this is a broad brush to tar them, but it's just a case of the industry as well. We still really, really put a lot of faith in strength and the idea of strength. And again, Bob having a physical ineptitude of being fat and liking board games, and his worth comes from his brain. And we value strength. We like that Hopper is good with guns. We like that Hopper can shoot humans in the face, like, and put his cigarette out in their eye, like, and that's just something that we like, and which is really funny, because there is an element of like, Stranger Things is meant to celebrate the outcasts. It's meant to celebrate the bullied, celebrate the people who find enjoyment out with that, who find it in like, things that are seen as fringe, and like, D&D, as much as D&D isn't fringe or anything, but in terms of mainstream media, especially from the 80s, like,
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got, like, they're definitely the kind of outcast characters. It's meant to celebrate that, which it does to an extent. To an extent. So it's meant to celebrate this cerebralness, but not only, and the nerds, but not if they're, like, actually geeks and cringy, because then we don't want anything to do with them. So I think that if they ever had plans for Bob to stick around, then that wouldn't have been a storyline that existed. He wouldn't have put Will in danger. But to be fair, the amount of people that put Will in danger in this series, he's one of a long list. So
yeah, 100%. And going back to what you were saying about his, like, you know, physical ineptitude, using air quotes, you know, you could argue if Bob, you know, wasn't so fat, he could have ran quicker and got away from the demi-dogs, you know? Like, you could go down that rabbit hole to blame his body size on his death, or he could have, you know, like you say, fought them off more, just, you know, outran them somehow.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely what's insinuated. That's 100% what's insinuated.
That's so dark.
But I think,
also just to that point, up until that point, he has done the most. You know, he's the one who's gone down into the basement, put the coding in, because he's the only one who knows how to do it, because he's the smartest. He's in the sphere. Like, he's the only one who knows the code in order to, like, reboot the system, in order to get everyone out of the building. And he's done that for like, you know, however many people are in that building at that point, and he's the last one standing, and he still gets killed.
He is the first one to volunteer as well.
Yeah. He's so brave. So brave. I also just want to come back to the relationship. Because I remember when I first watched the season, I see that there's that scene where Joyce is at the, like, I don't know, it's maybe like, I guess, like a Dollar Tree or something like that. And he comes in, he's asking for, I don't know what color it is, but like the little trick-or-treat jack-o'-lantern things. And she's like, oh, maybe some in the back. And they go out the back, and they're having a make-out session. And Bob literally says, I feel like a teenager. Going back to what you were saying about this, he doesn't feel worthy to be, like, making out with the Joyce, you know? Joyce is on this pedestal for Bob because of the social value she had or held in high school. You know, to your point, whether she still holds that now. Yeah. I mean, I think that's up for discussion. But Bob still views her at that level. And I remember thinking, but Endgame is meant to be Joyce and Hopper now, so this is just a stopgap. Yeah. I remember thinking that, and I was like, oh, okay, so, like, we just got to, like, you know, deal with this romantic connection. I obviously didn't know how it was going to end at that time, but I remember thinking, we're not meant to take this seriously. We're not meant to get too involved here, because we all know that Endgame is Joyce and Hopper. Yeah.
Okay. But also, we all know that Joyce isn't getting with a fat man. I'm sorry, but, like, we know that. We know that when she starts making out with Sean Astin, we know it's doomed from the start, because that's even if Hopper wasn't, we know that Joyce we understand, because we understand media. We understand that Barb was, like, a symbol of Nancy's geek life when she wants to be cool. Like, we understand that is a physical, like, symbol of that. We understand what Bob represents, and it's not Endgame for Joyce, which is really annoying, because I kind of feel that Joyce, like, as much as Bob is clearly invested in Joyce, in her kids, in her life, in the relationship that they have together, and being happy with them, Joyce isn't ever seen to be invested in him. She likes the easy. Definitely. She likes the stability. She likes cuddles and kisses and things. Yeah. And it's a case of, but even then, even though she's making out with him in a cupboard, there's this weird feeling of sexlessness to it, which I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? What do you actually want from him? Because I think she's had a really, really hard time, and she needs things not to be hard anymore. And she has someone who is stable and kind and dependable and puts her on a pedestal. So is safe hands. She's safe hands. I'm pretty sure that if anything ever did get super serious, she'd be out the door in the second, because she didn't want that in the first place.
Well, we know, because he suggests, why don't they move?
Yes.
Why don't they move to his hometown? Yeah. And she says no.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that, but that makes no sense. He's just like, yeah, if we moved somewhere, then we would just be a couple. There wouldn't be all of our history hanging around her neck. But no, the history around her neck is what separates the two of them, and she needs that. And no, bad Joyce. Bad Joyce.
Bad Joyce, 100%. And also to compare Bob and Hopper as love interests for Joyce, you know, you mentioned how good he is with the boys, you know, how he isn't trying to be a father figure. He's like more like a friend, but also not like a close friend. He's just an adult who is there if they need him, which is like, you know, probably the healthiest position he could take for himself in his family dynamic.
So healthy.
Yes. It's so, but he's also, Bob is incredibly emotionally intelligent. You know, this is why he can read that something's wrong. This is why, like, and again, going back to the whole Joyce not telling him thing, I think about Will's history last year. That in itself, that's like, well, you're not part of this club. Like, this is like an arm. I'm keeping your arm's length. Everyone else in this show can know what happened to Will last year, but you, my new love interest, cannot. And I think that's a really telling decision from Joyce.
Oh, absolutely. And then again, like when that happens and stuff, it just shows that it doesn't faze him for a second. She's like, "Oh, Will's sick." So he turns up and he's like, "I've got board games because this always made me sick."
I know.
Because he's considerate, he's kind, and he knows exactly what he's doing. And then when she's like, "Oh no, you can't come in," he doesn't for a second go, "Joyce, you have to let me in. Joyce, you need to let me help. Joyce, you need to do that." Not at all. He goes, "Okay, that is absolutely fine," and is not phased in the slightest because he is a healthy adult. And it's only when he's walking away being like, obviously, if I can help you, just let me know. They don't call me Bob the Brain for nothing. And that's when Joyce lets him in on the secret, when there's something that he has to offer her out with himself. Again, feeding back to me saying that I felt that I had to be funny in order to serve myself. Like, Bob has to be smart. The only way Bob can contribute to this group is by being smarter than everyone else. Otherwise, there's no place for him. And it really bothers me.
Oh my God, it's such a good point. Bringing it back to this idea that fat people, plus size characters have to provide a service. That's the only way that they can provide their value to the thin main characters of the story.
Yes.
Oh God. It's so frustrating because, again, to your point you mentioned earlier, which was so well made and so eloquent, this is a show that's meant to celebrate those on the edge of like society or like, you know, culture, right? Those that have been othered because they like D&D. Will, like, you know, Will's obviously coded queer and he feels very othered for that. Like all of these things, I'm like, oh yeah, great, grand for that, do that. You know, you got Hopper when we first introduced him, he's like, you know, completely riddled with grief. I'm like, yeah, show that representation all day long, show it. But then when they get to their fat characters, they are so disrespectful. It is. And I don't know whether I'm finding this conversation cathartic, Sarah, or if I'm just getting more and more frustrated. So I'm just like,
you're just rage. You're with the rage factor.
Yeah, but going back to the emotional intelligence thing, I just really want to compare Bob and Hopper. So we have, like I said, Bob, incredibly emotionally intelligent, understands where he is with the kids. And then Hopper, especially in season 3, like they completely butcher this man's character in season 3, becomes this really possessive, like toddler throwing his toys at the pram when Joyce doesn't seem to reciprocate his romantic feelings. But then we also have that storyline where he cannot communicate with 11. And so he needs a woman to hold his hands about emotions. And I'm just like, how on earth, you know, going back to this idea, we know Joyce and Hopper are meant to be endgame, but how can they be when you've just showed us Bob, who's clearly, by all accounts, apart from physical, is a better man?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And I think there's an element of this is difficult because we're talking so much about how Bob is a great character and he is better and stuff. And I think there is still an underlying thing that's not interesting to us. We're not interested because the thing is, Joyce damaged, Hopper damaged, but their damage fits. Like in the way that Joyce is too over emotional and can't communicate with her boys, she has someone who is less emotional and knows how to speak man. And then you have 11, who is an absolute hellfire teenage girl, and has never been raised in a kind of thing of like, you know, boundaries of parents and things. So she sees her and herself as Hopper as not a father-daughter relationship. In fact, it kind of changes in his absence. She kind of like starts to be like, oh, my dad's not here anymore, and like,
yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, but that wasn't what their relationship started out like. Season 2, which I think at its strongest, they were equals and friends, and I think that he was letting, like, there was an element of like, you know, them seeing each other for the people that they were, and then finding that family connection together that's kind of just fallen into a less interesting father-daughter relationship for me. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. But what I'm
No, it's all valid.
But what I kind of feel is that we know that their end game, even though they are the worst, because they are the worst, their damage doesn't like that. We're not interested in Joyce getting healthy. We're not interested in Joyce being whole. We're looking for people who are torn together, who have been through it with their kids. We're just looking for people that we understand that when the thing ends eventually at the end of season 5 or whatever is coming out, like when that comes out, we understand that they're going to end and need therapy. That's what we want.
Well, you know, in the 80s, therapy wasn't that common or not that popular, so they'll struggle. I think, to actually take that step. No, that's such a good point. The phrase you use, how their damage fits, is really interesting. And as well, the fact they're both quote-unquote families, where Bob clearly isn't a family man. He doesn't seem to have children of his own.
Yeah.
Again, implying a bit of a, you know, nerdy virgin.
Yeah,
because obviously,
I know.
Yeah,
it's
nasty. Because it's fucking Sean Astin. You know,
Sean Astin. That guy can get tail if he wants. God damn.
Please get over yourselves. Show.
I know.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about Bob?
Just that I miss him.
That you miss him. Forever in our hearts, Bob and Barb. It's double B's.
In our hearts, forever in our
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this goes in to our third character, and possibly the most we have to speak about because he is a staple part of this cast. We're going to talk about Hopper, played by David Harbour.
I love him. I love him.
Straight away, I love.
Yeah,
I'm going to try and go through a really rough whistle-stop tour of his character. Thank you so much. Watch this space. So he is the sheriff of Hawkins. He is a drunk. He's a smoker. He's got a bit of a dad bod, I would say. I wouldn't necessarily call him fat. I would just call him. He just seems to be a bit chunky, but thick. That fantastic word. Yes, thick. But definitely gives off this idea that he's not looking after himself, right? Because we find out he's riddled with grief because his child died of cancer some point in the past. Anyway, he gets involved because he's a part of the rescue team who rescues Will from the Upside Down, and he has all these flashbacks of his child, and we get to understand why Hopper is so angry and so disengaged with his work. All makes sense. At the end of season 1, we see that after 11 disappeared into the Upside Down, someone's leaving Eggo waffles out in the woods for someone. Oh, it's Hopper. Hopper has been leaving out waffles for 11, and now they've, like you mentioned, have now developed this friendship. But he doesn't want 11 to go outside because he thinks the men in suits will take her away, which is not a ridiculous idea. And she only eats the Eggo waffles. Then what happens at the end of season 2 with those guys? I actually have no idea.
Elle goes off on her little journey to discover her sister or other people who escaped the thing, and then and then he gets back. So Hopper and Elle are away from each other because Hopper spends most of his time stuck in the lab. Oh, and all that happens while 11 is away.
While 11's away. Okay, fantastic. Is the end of season 2 the snowball?
Yes.
Okay, so we have the snowball, and that's all very cute. Then we go into season 3. That's where the kind of really strong father-daughter vibes coming in. You've got 11. Is that right? Am I getting confused now? This is season 3, season 4.
It's when Elle and Will are together. So
Elle and Mike are together.
Not Will.
Yeah, that's it. And they're doing the whole teenage thing where they're they're kissing, but then when the parents walk in, they're just reading, books on the side of the room. We've all done it. We've all been there. Hopper's like, you can't have this door open more than X amount of inches. But anyway, he gets really frustrated because Eleven's, being a teenage girl, she's rebelling. And Joyce has to be like, maybe you should just write a letter to Elle explaining your feelings. And then Mike is also being a bit of like a twat because he's also like 13, 14 years old boy and he's horny as hell. So you've got this dynamic going on between like Hopper being like, that's my daughter, and Mike being like, that's my girlfriend. So that's really annoying. Then eventually Joyce and Hopper are meant to go on a date, but Joyce stands him up because she's more interested in these magnets or demagnetizing, and he gets really offended. And then when she wants to go be with Murray and Alexei, the Russian guy that they've kidnapped, he gets really jealous about that, and it's like, for fuck's sake, Hopper, get the fuck over yourself. And then eventually they infiltrate the Russian base under the mall, and they have the big, I don't know, whatever it's called, like big Hadron Collider where they're trying to open up the Upside Down, and they realise, they need someone needs to go and touch it by the thing, and Hopper goes and he gets beaten up, and then Joyce has to turn it on, and then Hopper disappears, and I was like, oh no, they've actually killed Hopper. That's actually quite dramatic. And then we get this letter that he leaves for Elle, and Elle reads it, and it's actually really lovely. But then it turns out at the end of that season that Hopper isn't dead. He's actually just been transported to Russia, which I just think is shit. But anyway, we get to season 4. We see Hopper, and he has lost a considerable amount of weight. You know why? Because he's in a Russian gulag. They are not well known for keeping their prisoners well fed. He then has to fight his way out of the Russian gulag. He makes a friend with one of the guards called Enzo, who I did really fancy. Yes. And they get caught. There's like double crossing going on. Then they have to fight the Demogorgon. During all this time, Joyce and Murray have flown to Russia to save them. They're all stuck in the Russian gulag fighting off the Demogorgon. And they manage to get out of it. And then at some point, they happen to get back to the States. And then they run into the kids. And Hopper has his reunion with Elle, and that's really nice and romantic, but of course his weight gets brought up time and time again throughout this reunion, and then the season ends. Sorry, listeners, that was a lot. That was a lot to go through 4 seasons of this man's character arc. But let's get into it. So you mentioned at the very beginning, you like Hopper, you love this man.
I love a damaged dad.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sarah's type, damaged dad.
Yeah, oh god, yeah. Like, I'm just like, I'm not saying it's right. Like, I'd rather, I know that this love of Hopper is wrong. I don't care.
No.
But yeah, like, I thought that Hopper was a great character, but I kind of feel that I feel bad because David Harbour is such an incredible actor. He's one of these people that can masterfully walk the line between comedy and drama. And what makes Hopper such a strong character is how funny he is as well. How he can turn on, like, the American dad, and like, the sarcastic police chief, and the guy in the Hawaiian shirt with an incredible mustache. Like, he can be.
I love the Hawaiian shirt.
Me too.
Yeah.
Like,
it's such a good look.
These guys, but sometimes I kind of feel that for the sake of action, they sacrifice some really interesting things. So when he's riddled with grief, that's obviously really tragic. And we find out that his child died of cancer when she was 10. And his wife and his marriage didn't survive afterwards, and she's away and she's married to someone else just now. But one thing that I think was totally underplayed, there was this huge revelation that came up and was never done again, and it was in the Russian gulag, where he says that where he talks about his time like in the service, that Hopper was at one point in the service or something, and took part in something that exposed him to radiation. So it turns out that his daughter's cancer is his fault. So he was exposed to radiation. He was dealing with things away while he was on tour, and then he came back and exposed his family to it. And he said that loads of other people in his unit got cancer or got sick, or their families got sick, and then it was already too late. And the thing is, like, that got mentioned once, and I'm like, this is so juicy, and it never gets brought up again. Never gets brought up again. And I'm like, this is such an incredible revelation, the idea that Hopper has been carrying around that he gave his child cancer because of his decisions, and she's the one who suffered and died as opposed to him, and that's why he's been suffering so much. So it's the fact that his decisions affect his children, which causes so much extra guilt with the fact that he's in a gulag and he doesn't know what's happened to Elle. So it's a case of his decisions has led to like his children potentially suffering, and it's such rich territory. But instead of actually exploring it, we're like, we're battering the Demogorgon. Let's do like a Stranger Things does Gladiator in terms of putting him in the ring and then releasing the Demogorgon, and he has to like, you know, pick up a pitchfork and fight for his supper and all that. And I'm just like, it's dramatic, but I'm bored. But this is one thing that I find really funny, and I just don't think they figured out how to do it correctly, because the thing is, in order for children to get up to shenanigans, the first rule of any sort of children's literature is get rid of the parents. It's why lots of school things take place at school or boarding school. Harry Potter's boarding school, there's no parents there, so they can get up to shenanigans. And that's why Stranger Things 1 worked, because Elle didn't have any parents, and the boys are at that age where they are constantly on their bikes at each other's houses. You don't know where your kids are. So the kids could disappear for days, and they could call home and say, I'm staying at Lucas's, I'm staying at Mikey's, I'm staying somewhere else, and you just would not question it, because that's just how things are. Like, it was very much like the idyllic suburban 80s where you left your doors unlocked, but you weren't really afraid of crime or anything. So the absence of adults was great, what leads to opportunities for the kids to get into the story. However, as we've gone through the series, we've got way more invested in the adult characters and the ideal of the ensemble. So what they have to do every single season is find some sort of plot device to get the adults away and then bring them back at the end. So it was in season 2, Elle was off on her own journey, so it wasn't the adults that left, it was Elle, and then everyone else, like, you know, was in the lab, so that actually worked. Although it was Scoop Troop, so then you had like Steve and Robin and Lucas's sister and Dustin like off in their own wee group. And this is what I really loved about season 2. I thought it was masterful in the way that they had all these different ensemble casts doing something in a bigger plot that just naturally came together all at the end for the finale, which was brilliant. But they just it's really hard to replicate that. That's a really difficult thing to do, plot device. So then they're just like, send Hopper to Russia. I was like, that is such a cop out. And then it means that Joyce and Murray spend episodes trying to get on plane.
And like, can we just point out the character flaw in that? Because are you telling me Joyce is going to leave her sons and her adopted daughter, who she knows the government are out to get, on their own in a new town?
It doesn't make no sense. And she's like, oh, because I'm going to get Hopper. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, Joyce. One thing that I will say about Joyce is she is determined. But what a really strong point of her character is that she's so determined. And in season 1, she's like, I know that you look at me and you think that I am a car crash and I am lazy and I'm just a mess. However, I'm going to stick to my guns here, even though she knew it was right. She knew how she was perceived and she knew what her limits were, but she didn't let them stop her from, like, you know, actively pursuing her son. That worked in her favor. However, in order for Joyce to go from, like, I know my son is lost and he is trying to contact me and something weird is going on here, to go from that to being like, my boyfriend, or like, you know, my friend is in a Russian gulag and I'm going to commandeer a plane with a guy who speaks basic Russian to go and get him back myself. I'm like, that's jumping the shark a bit.
No, it really is jumping the shark a bit. Like, I was really shocked by the Russian storyline. It just didn't make sense. The only character I actually believed during that whole thing was Murray. I totally saw that from Murray. I get that, because he is that kind of character where we don't know a lot about him. He's eccentric. I can imagine him doing this. But for like, even like Hopper, like, I understand him working with Enzo to get out. That tracks for me. But what didn't track for me was him sending a letter to Joyce to let him know that he was still alive. Like, no, he wouldn't put Joyce in that danger, because he wouldn't want to put 11 in that danger. Going back to what you were saying, I mean, I completely completely had forgotten about this extra level of grief and guilt he felt towards his child, which makes so much sense about then why he's so overprotective over Eleven, because it's like his second chance, right? So you're telling me that this man who has his second chance where he doesn't, his decisions are going to impact a child, I'm going to do it right this time, would then send a coded letter to a random woman in California to say, by the way, the Russians have got me, and by the way, I know you've got my child, so keep her safe. It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
No, it's just, it's so weird. I think it's just, again, I think it's being fan-led. I think it's growing at a rapid rate because it's so popular, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a problem of success, and don't we all wish we had them, right? So it's growing at such a rapid thing. But however, if you can't tell your essential story well, then what are you doing? So it's just a little bit like, I think Hopper was wasted, and also the opportunity to bench Hopper for half a season, if not an entire season, in order to do a weight loss story and get him have this really haunting, traumatic thing happen to him. It just doesn't fit in the language of the show. It's just, it's the whole charm of it is meant to be harking back to this horror in small town suburbia. And to then turn into being we're actually going to a Russian prison.
International.
It just doesn't track. It's just a case of it's what happens with every sci-fi sequel. If you have a sci-fi that works, in the next one, the only way you can bring it up is to get the government involved, which I kind of think at the start was a choice. Oh, we're going to do that thing, we get the government involved, the nostalgia, we're bringing it back, and then they lost control of it, and now it's the only way they can actually make their story make sense, which and stuff.
Yeah, it is sad. I'd love to just talk about the fan reaction to Hopper. So I think, and I wonder if you agree, that David Harbour is the breakout star of this show. More so than the kids, more so than any of the other adult actors. I think I didn't know David Harbour before this show.
Yeah.
I think he's in I think I saw him in The Equalizer, but I have no idea where that lies in his filmography. But he wasn't a star, and he comes into this against Winona Ryder, and I appreciate even casting Winona Ryder is such a nostalgic choice, because we all know Winona from the 80s, from the 90s. She is our gothic gal. So I love that. I think it's such a fantastically smart decision to cast Winona, but we hadn't seen her in much recently up until this point. She really had fallen out of vogue, and then with the rise in nostalgia, as you were saying, she comes back into it, and you see they've made the same casting choices for the show Yellow Jackets. You have Christina Ricci and Juliette Lewis, who are again real big stars from the 80s and 90s, coming into a show which takes place half in the 90s. It's a really smart casting decision to remind us of the nostalgia of then. I love it. I think it's super clever. But with David Harbour, I don't know, had you known him before Stranger Things?
I actually, yes, but I don't know where from. And I'm racking my brain.
Okay.
I'm I don't know where from. I knew that also he was married to Lily Allen, but
still is. Yeah, so he's not in loads. He's in WE in 2011. He's in The Green Hornet. I have no idea how big he is in these roles. Revolutionary Road. He's in Quantum of Solace. He is in stuff. Oh, he's in Brokeback Mountain. He cannot be that old in Brokeback Mountain. War of the Worlds. That's 2005 time. But going up to The Equalizer, which I knew him from, that's 2014. And then we go he's in 10 episodes of The Newsroom, which I guess was quite a popular show.
I remember him that'll be who it is. It'll be The Newsroom. So I'm such an Aaron Sorkin fan, so I follow.
There you are.
I followed The West Wing religiously, so I know more about American politics than UK politics because of Wing. And The Newsroom was the next series after First Working, so that's where I know him from. Again, it's just that he's in one thing that I've seen. I'm no, he's a massive star.
You knew it, yeah. He's in Black Mass in 2015, and then in Suicide Squad in 2016. But that is the year that Stranger Things came out. And then he's exploded, right? So you've got Hellboy, we mentioned, that's 2019. He
such a
is
good
in.
choice. I really fancied Hellboy.
Yeah, it's a very good
well.
choice.
Ron Perlman in the OG Hellboy. Oh, works for me.
No, I really enjoy the original Hellboys. I think they're really good, really fun action films.
Steampunky and really camp.
Yeah,
Just,
really camp. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Extraction, Black Widow. So he's now in like the Marvel Universe, Violent Christmas. We have a Ghost, Gran Turismo. So he's making money. The man's making money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember though the reaction of like, oh my god, like you say, like, what a hot guy, damaged dad, love this vibe.
Yes.
And there's been fan edits. If you like go on TikTok or Instagram, people like doing like little fan edits and reels of David Harbour like walking in his sheriff's outfit. Dad bod goals. All of this.
I need this.
You need to get your algorithm working for you,
right? Sounds like it. I quite liked David Harbour in the jaded police chief. Again, it was a nostalgic choice. We've seen it a million times before. The alcoholic, like, someone that used to be like a detective, like high up in the force, but seen too much and has have to take a residency in a small town. We've seen it a million times before. Like, it's Twin Peaks. Like, we've seen it. So it's really, it was really familiar and nostalgic. And I thought, when seeing someone do a role that's been done a million times before, I think it's really difficult to bring like even like the tragic backstory. The tragic backstory is a trope as well. So to see someone do something that has been seen so many times before and give it nuance, like I thought he did a really great job. I'm just trying to think about the dad bod just kind of in particular. I think it makes sense. Again, we want this to be rooted in, like, everyone wants to feel like the girl next door. You want to be like, welcome to Hawkins, the safest town in America. And so you want everyone to be really comforting and really familiar and stuff. And I thought it was great that he kind of had a bit of a dad bod for it, because even though we've seen it before, he's not like this hardened, like, guy causing bar fights or anything. He's too messed up for that. So I think that it really worked well in his favour. But also, like, he's not... It's in the same way that, sometimes you see teen shows with people in their mid-20s, and then you have the opposite. You have Grey's Anatomy, where you have, I'm the new head of cardiothoracic surgery, and they're like 23, and you're like, They're like, I might have skipped 3rd grade, and you're like, skipped 10 years, mate. That's to have these like young, sexy people playing like, they established authors or owners of higher ups or things. So to see a police chief that's like the correct age, the correct the correct age, the correct background, the correct body type, like the one that you're like, this all makes sense for the character, was really refreshing. And I just think that people fancying Hopper didn't have anything to do with his body. I think it's just because he was such a good actor and it was such a warm character and he did it so much justice. Which is why I'm all the more mad that they made him lose weight. Like, I'm all the more mad.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. So I mentioned he gets to the Russian gulag, and our first shot, there's a group of prisoners, and they all seem to be working on this railroad, and the camera pans, and then all of a sudden, like, this head pops up, and we see a very slimmed down Hopper. And obviously, like, the show's trying to convey that time has passed. Time has passed. He's clearly a prisoner. He's clearly not being fed appropriately. Therefore, he has lost weight.
Yes.
Right. I totally understand the visual storytelling happening.
Yeah.
But that is not how the audience have taken it. From how I viewed and what I have listened to, Sarah, has really disturbed me when it's come to Hopper's storyline. So I saw it on social media, I saw it in tweets, I heard it on a podcast, a very popular British podcast where they spoke about Stranger Things, and I heard one of the guests say, God, doesn't David Harbour look great? Oh, I could do with some time in the Russian gulag.
Oh, yikes.
I literally heard that phrase, and I saw it in tweets, and I was just like, whoa. That is not what you are meant to take away from this. This character has been starved. I have no idea how David Harbour lost weight. I don't need to know. But the character, the visual storytelling, is that this man has been tortured and beaten and starved. It is not meant to be aspirational. And yet, because we are so sick when it comes to diet culture,
yep,
we always view weight loss as positive.
Oh, yeah.
Even when the media is telling you this isn't meant to be positive, babe. People are still taking it as positive. And I couldn't believe my ears when I heard what people were saying.
That's so gross. That's so disgusting. And yeah, it's meant to be a side effect of torture. That's the weight loss is a side effect of torture. I always think that there are multiple ways to show that this is there. For example, they could have given him a beard. He could have been told to grow up.
Oh, yeah.
Another way of passage of time didn't require, weight loss or anything. Whatever. But again, to be fair, I'm still kind of the Russian storyline didn't really make sense to me anyway. If it was a case of going, also it would have made sense if it's a case of going rot and he's just like, what am I meant to do here? That would also make sense. But no, he's out fighting monsters for making people money who are betting on him, and he's working on railroads and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, right, whatever, sure, why not? But yeah, just the idea that people took that as a positive, because again, I think it also feeds into this idea that if you choose to lose weight, you just can. It's just a choice. And I'm like,
it's just a choice.
David Harbour is a very, very well paid person that has been asked to, for his role, lose weight. That's for his job. All actors, when I say all actors, I'm going to say all able-bodied actors, because it's a completely different name for disabled actors. But all able-bodied actors, when they show up to do it, that is actually what they're doing. Their body, their emotion, their experience, and their craft, it's how they provide their service and earn their money. So if they're asked to do something, play this character, then that's what they have to do, and they work that out as well. David Harbour will probably have been paid to lose weight, and it would have covered his nutritionist, his personal trainer, and he wouldn't have been working during the time, because he's so well paid that he wouldn't have had a 9 to 5. He wouldn't have had any job to be like, I have this 6-month period where my only goal is to lose this weight in a healthy way, in a way, and we just don't have those kind of means. It is not a choice. It is a cultivated plan that the uber wealthy can afford. So I think that it's just to be so glib about it is just you. I've never heard us described as sick before, but it is the best word I've ever heard. It just shows how sick we are. That's the thought that comes into your head.
Yeah, I think it is to not read the room, and like you say, that is one of the biggest lies that diet culture and the media like to perpetuate, is this idea that staying fat or gaining weight is a choice, and therefore we're making the wrong choice, right? And therefore we deserve all of the hardships or the exclusivity or the othering that befalls bigger people or marginalized bodies, and therefore in Hopper's case, what's interesting is, the show has made it clear, this is what's happened. However, in the same breath, it's gone, no matter how malnourished Hopper is, no matter how tired he must be from slaving away, literally, on these railroads while being fed nothing, while being tortured, he can still defeat a demigorgon when everyone else fails.
Yeah.
And going back to Bob Newby's superhero, seriously, Hopper is a superhero if this is how he's managed to survive this long. He is not a healthy man, and yet he still manages to survive. And then we get this scene where they get to the safe house that the kind of fixer owns with all the American stuff. And that's when he takes off his jumpsuit or whatever he's wearing at that time, and we get to see that he's got all this bruising and scars over his body. And we get to see how much he has shrank. Like, this man is incredibly thin at this point. And I think, and I might be wrong, you might be able to correct me, this is when Joyce and Hopper kiss.
It is, you're right. We see Joyce, when we see what has happened to his body, we are seeing it at the same time that Joyce sees it. So it's difficult because obviously, like, you know, it's a visual medium. We're being made to feel things, and that's what the creators are trying to do. So we're not seeing it from Hopper's point of view. I think it would have been so much more powerful if Hopper saw himself in the mirror for the first time. Can you imagine how that scene would be if he saw his own body? But no, the first time we see this body is through Joyce's lens, so it's through a lens of desire. So we see Hopper's body and see Joyce react in a yearning way of pain for the pain that he's gone through, but also in, like, you know, your body is still here, you're still alive. So it's all through this, like, you know, yearning and appreciation, when it should have been through absolute horror, because that's it. She goes and wants to touch him to be like, what happened to you? But then they share a kiss and it becomes this romantic movement. And I'm like, nah, nope, not.
Yeah.
It just like, I get it. I get it. I get it. I mean, I'm shipping Joyce and Hopper as much as the next person. I love the two of them together. I think they're a screwball comedy. They are Kermit and Miss Piggy, but like Hopper's Miss Piggy, and I think, and Joyce is Kermit, and I love the two of them together. But at the same time, like, Joyce has been yearning for him for a long time, and, like, you know, wanting his safety and thinking he's dead, or not quite believing that he's dead, and then is having to process all those emotions. But then she's gone through like an episode and a half with him, but it's when he takes his shirt off and she sees his bruised body, that's when she makes a move. She doesn't, like, you know, go and try to hold him like immediately and stuff. Oh,
yeah,
it's so hard, because again, that's only for Hopper. Like, we don't get that, because when Hopper first sees Joyce, it's when she's in, like, she's all kitted out in the gear and stuff, so she doesn't look like she's not taking her clothes off, and we're seeing it through a desire.
No.
She's battered to crap from, like, you know, being in a plane crash and stuff. And
literally,
the world still goes slow motion. We still have, like, you know, the steam from a burst pipe, and the world slows as the two of them see each other, and like, and that's this really powerful moment. But that's Hopper seeing Joyce for the first time. That's him seeing her, and she's like this vision of hope that's come in from the cold. But when Joyce sees Hopper, which is like an episode later, that's when she sees her moment of desire. It's relief when she sees him alive in the prison, but it's desire when he takes his clothes off and we see
100%.
His body has changed. And it's, I don't know, it's difficult. It's really hard to, like, put my finger on it, because I don't think any of these decisions are conscious or malicious, but there's still something that's profoundly uncomfortable about them.
So I actually do think they're purposeful. And the reason why I say that is the last episode, the reunion with the kids. So you have 11 back in the cabin in the woods, and she's kind of reminiscing of her old life and reminiscing about her family connection, her fatherly connection she has with Hopper. And we hear these steps, and then Hopper kind of bursts through the door. 11, you know, Millie Bobby Brown's performance in this moment is fantastic, and she says, I didn't close the door, I kept it however many inches. She's meant to keep it open, which is such a good line. And they embrace, they reconcile, they're crying, and they both recognise they've lost their hair. By this point, they've both got shaved heads, which I think is a really nice mirroring moment.
Yeah, that's such a lovely moment.
It's such a lovely moment. But 11, she says, she goes, you look, and there's a bit of a pause, and Hopper completes it and says, not fat, and then they laugh. And I was like, oh, okay. I remember when that first happened, I remember going, oh, that was gross.
Yeah.
That was a really gross thing to say here.
Yeah.
And then it doubles down, Sarah, because as he goes out and he sees all the other kids are there, and you've got Joyce coming back to Jonathan and Will, and he sees Mike, and they do the whole, you know, like fatherly and the boyfriend thing when they have to be like, you know, handshakes.
Yep.
And he says to Mike, you've grown. And Mike replies, you've shrunk. So going back to what you were saying about, is it intentional with the lust scene, for lack of a better word, the desire scene happening, purposely when Hopper is smaller, and we can actually see how small he's become. And then they double down by going like, oh no, we really want to make it clear that everyone is actually, this is a positive. It's a positive that Hopper has lost weight. And that just feels so gross, because Eleven nor Mike don't understand why Hopper is as thin as he is now. Yeah. But they both have to comment on it. Yeah. When they first meet him again, it's like this emotional reaction. They both comment on it within like 3 sentences of seeing him again. And it is, smiles and laughs.
This bothers me so much. It's genuinely, it's such a weird trope. It's so weird. The idea that it has to be, that for a bigger body to go in either direction must require comment in the script, where it doesn't really matter, because then you have characters, people lose and gain weight, like in TV shows constantly. In Hollywood, what usually happens is you have someone get thinner over the series, which is always really sad, but it's never really commented on. But whenever you have a fat person, it's almost like there's an elephant. It's almost like letting a fat person on screen. You have to have some sort of comment. Like there has to be an acknowledgement from the creators to say, we know there's a fat person here, but trust me, there's for a reason. In Dumpling, Willow Dean's first line, within the first 30 seconds, she goes, I may be fat, but at least I'm not delusional. And in Bridgerton, Penelope Featherington, she's not even on screen for 30 seconds, where she goes, I am this, and her sister goes, what she is 2 stone heavier than she ought to be. And it's like, these are the first lines, the first interactions with these characters, and it's like there has to be an acknowledgement in dialogue that, yes, we know, trust me, there's a point. And I kind of feel that this is the reverse of that. So we know that Hopper, when we first meet Hopper, we know that he is not taking care of himself. So therefore there's kind of there's a lot of beer, but he's got a beer gut. So there's a kind of, it's not acknowledged in dialogue, which I will give them credit for. However, but the thing is, he eats donuts and stuff like that, but that's a kind of police, police stereotype. But then when he comes back and sees the kids, and then they comment on it, it is the weirdest. It is the weirdest interaction, because I thought the mirroring, the touching of their hair is an acknowledgement about what they have both been through. And that was so powerful. And I'm like, you don't need to do anything else. That you look not fat and stuff like that. Because to be fair, I'm pretty sure that at one point Hopper says in something to do with the series, something like, the short hair suits her. And if there was some sort of mirroring back, if she says it suits you, then that would be all it is. It's a case of the two of them. The two of them are, this is why they're fated to be father and daughters, because they are the same. They have both been through it all, and they have each other's backs. That's how those two are equals, and that's when their relationship is strongest. But it's weird. I actually quite like the line from Mike saying you've shrunk, but it's because Hopper's been absent for a season, so in his mind Mikey has gone through more and Hopper has been brought down, sort of thing, in his estimation. So Hopper isn't the big saviour god. Hopper was the one that was brought down, and Mikey's starting to realise that the adults who protect him are not are subject to the monsters as well. So there's an element of he's kind of saying, I'm not scared of you anymore, but linking it twice with eyes is just completely unnecessary. And also, again, it's using it for a tone shift. It is a really important line, but we're going to use comedy for making a fat joke in order to make it palatable. And I'm like, oh, that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is. It's just that's absolutely the best word for it. It's so uncomfortable. Yeah. And when we look back on the history that Stranger Things has of treating its plus size characters, where they have a character who has experienced dramatic weight loss, it is a choice in how they have their other characters react to it.
Exactly.
Because you're just then going, oh, then what were these people thinking about Barb or thinking about Bob? They didn't have their redemption weight loss journey, quote unquote, Yeah. And they died. They died, Sarah, because they didn't have they couldn't redeem themselves.
That's not a good statistic. When you look,
it's not good.
It's like, how many fat people do you have on this show? I see. How many have died? I see.
And how many have perished? Ah, okay. But you've brought some back before, but none of the fat people. Fantastic. Exactly. I see where your morals are.
Oh yeah, when they did.
No, they did. No coming back for the fat people.
No,
not on this show. Let's create our own show, Sarah.
It's very upsetting.
Is there anything else you wanted to mention with Hopper?
I'm really intrigued as to where Hopper's going because,
very good question.
I kind of want to know where everyone's going to end up because I know we're coming into the last season is the next season is going to be released. We have the big bad. Hawkins has fallen into the upside down. Like, it's a case of Hawkins' safety, the town has been destroyed, and it's the big overall ending. But in the way that I find it interesting how Nancy became a sort of subverted final girl trope in her own way, and how people have played out. I kind of don't know what they're going to do because, again, in order for the kids to get up to shenanigans, the adults can't be there. But at the end of season 4, it's all of them in the field standing together and staring at as if they are they are the front lines. They're literally the front lines. Yeah. This is a group effort. So I wonder what they're going to do. How do they split up? How are they going to handle this series, and who's going to have what trope? But because they're all back together again, they all have to fall into their own tropes as well. And Hopper's the leader. Like, Hopper's the leader and Elle is his general. Like, that's always been their relationship in whatever way. When it comes to the end, there's always like, you know, a moment where Hopper finds the kids and then they go forward. It's a case of the kids can't handle anything more themselves. They've taken it as far as they can go. Now they need a grown up, and that's when Hopper steps in. But now Hopper's back. I'm really intrigued to see where he's going, and I want to know how much of it is him changing character and becoming this like very stereotypical action hero because now he looks like one. I would be far more, in the same way that I'd be much more interested if Eddie was a fat person, if Hopper was still alcoholic, damaged, like, you know, fat police chief. That's who I want to see take on this evil. I don't want fresh out the gulag like action hero Hopper. I don't want it. So,
no, totally.
I don't want voice on his arm, like, you know, me and my family. I don't want that guy. I want damaged dad.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. Like, I'd be interested to see whether David Harbour has been instructed to keep the weight off or whether he has gained it back. In reality, he should gain it back because he will be eating a normal diet again. Yeah. There would be no reason for him to remain. I mean, I guess it depends how much time has passed between 4 and 5. But yeah, like that would be really telling to see how they handle that.
Yeah. I want to just on Eggos being like, I haven't eaten in 6 months, kid. I am eating all. Fuck off. Get your own Eggos. Go buy your own. You've got pocket money. You can buy your own food. I want him like going too far in the other direction.
Yeah, fantastic. All credit to him. Eat, man.
Eat.
Earned eat. It's very important. You need to fucking eat.
Yeah.
So, I know we spoke about the plus size characters. I just have one final question because this is something that's bugged me since the end of season 4. And I just want to know your thoughts because you are a fan. So we have the Will and Mike storyline where Mike's kind of been ignoring Will. He feels really uncomfortable around Will because Will isn't like, quote unquote, the other lads in the group. Like, he isn't pursuing romantic relationships with girls, and it kind of puts Mike on edge. I mean, we know as the audience, even though it's not been explicit, we know as the audience, like, Will is clearly meant to be gay and clearly loves Mike, and that's the whole thing. They have this moment when they're like traveling cross country or trying to get Elle, where Will gives Mike this painting, and it's all of them dressed up as like knights and swords people fighting like a three-headed dragon, I think.
Yeah.
And Mike's at the leader of the group, and he's like the one like, you know, closest to the dragon, and he's got like a heart on him. And Will says, "That's because you're the heart of the group." does Will mean that literally? Like, he thinks that, like, Mike's the leader of the group of the kids? Or does he mean you're the heart of the group because you have my heart because I love you?
I don't know. I hope that Will doesn't love Mike, because Will can do so much better, and I think
I can't.
I hope not. I mean, I don't know, because again, it's really difficult to judge, because each show that deals with teenagers deals with their sexual awakening and their sexuality differently. And so far, Stranger Things has been for the younger generation anyway, has been a relatively sexless show. Like, their emotional relationships have been awkward. Like, the fact that Max and Lucas break up and get back together multiple times, and that's their relationship. That's that I dump your ass whenever you annoy me and then we get back together. That's kind of thing. Yeah. It's different for, like, Nancy and Jonathan, who are shagging all the time. I kind of feel that, like, Will is realizing that he's losing people. I think I don't know whether he loves Mike or he loves their relationship. And he's really worried that it's going, because as soon as Elle comes on the scene and Mike starts, like, wanting to get a girlfriend, and that's it, they're over. So I don't really think it's how he has your heart. I don't know why. I think he's very mistaken, because when he says that Mike is the heart of the group, that's bullshit. Mikey is the most selfish little prick going.
That's a bit that really rubbed me up the wrong way. I was like, that is wrong, Will. And I don't know whether that's Will interpreting it wrong or whether that's the writers interpreting it wrong. I was like, that's not it. That's not the group. That's not how that group dynamic works.
No, I think it's the writers interpreting it wrong. I think because the thing is, Mikey really cares, but his cares are selfish. His cares are selfish.
Yeah, 100%.
So, but at the same time, like, he's got protagonist syndrome, but he technically is the protagonist. So, like, it's almost like it's justified, even though he's a little shit. So I think it's the writers misinterpreting it and thinking, and kind of, like, positioning, because again, Mikey throughout the season, just because everyone else is dealing with their own stuff, Mikey is slipping into the background when he is meant to be the main character. He is meant to be the one that, like, brings Elle into the group, and then, like, fights the most for her when she's, like, going and disappearing and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's all, like, I think that there's almost the writers are trying to make sure that he stays relevant when everyone else is more interesting.
That's exactly how I read it. That's exactly how I read it.
But I do feel really bad for Will, because I think this is, again, too much is going on in the show, and it's really difficult because everyone's split up and everyone has to go and be on their different journeys, and I don't think that we got enough of this, but because again, Will was absent for all of season 1 and possessed most of season 2.
I know.
It's so interesting that Will is trying so desperately to keep the D&D group together. Like, even though they're becoming actual adventurers, Will wants it to still be fantasy, because he knows that as they're growing up, he's losing them. And that really breaks my heart. And I'm like, I wish that was explored more. Like, I really wish that was explored more, because Will is the person who has lost the most. He has lost
100%.
He has lost all sense of safety because he has been taken and possessed. He has lost all kinds of, like, all kinds of comfort in his family. He has lost his friends. He has lost his home. Like, he's the one that has lost everything. To an extent, he lost Jonathan, but then Jonathan's the one that kind of was, like, making sure, being like, that we are always good, right? Which was a beautiful moment. Just Jonathan, like, you do realise that I know when it's fine, which was lovely. I wish there was just explicit, though. I'm just like, stop dancing around it. Just fucking say it. Because again, he said it with Robin. Like, Robin's outwardly queer, which was weird because I totally shipped Robin. Like, I can usually spot queer girly from a mile away, but no, I really shipped. I thought, oh, Steve and Robin, this is great. This is fantastic. But yeah, I actually think that Steve and Nancy are a romantic endgame, and I'm just like,
yeah, I did too.
I don't know how I feel about that, but yeah, it's different. I don't know. It's weird. I think that they're having to fight tooth and nail. I think they might have had a long game plan for Mikey, and they're having to stick to it. And they're having to fight for their lives because nobody likes him. That's what I would like to do.
Totally. Like, he's the one that could easily, like, drop out of the group.
100%.
Like, easily. I literally said, I think, because I got... I've already expressed my feelings for Stranger Things. But yeah, in season 4, I was like, I could literally drop Mike and Jonathan, like that.
Yeah.
Like, they add nothing to the story for me. Like,
No.
nothing.
I like
Even Lucas, who doesn't have a lot to do in season 4, I found his arc interesting.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, graduating from geek to jock is an interesting,
Yeah.
you know, position to find yourself in.
Yeah.
And going back to, like, to the awful bully of, like, the basketball group, he is clearly 35 years old, that actor.
That guy's got a mortgage.
He has 2 kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on. It's so funny. Like, I love it because, like, we get it. You know, we understand the media language being used. Like, we're meant to take the piss, but it really is funny.
Yeah, it's so.
Sarah, have you got anything else you want to raise on Stranger Things?
I wish that more originals were being made. We're kind of in the media landscape of sequels and seasons. When do that, I think I'm totally with you. You know what I wanted? I wanted an anthology series. I wanted them to do what I think Stranger Things. If Stranger Things was American Horror Story, it was amazing. If we were in 80s in Hawkins, like, you know, 1 year, and then we were in Victorian London with the same cast the next year, I think it would have been the best show in the world.
Oh, yeah, that's a fun idea.
I love the idea of this cast doing different things and having different dynamics in the same way that, like, what's happening right now, the Haunting of Bly Manor and the Haunting on Hill House. And I love that they're telling different horror stories with the same cast and doing different dynamics. That I think that if Stranger Things had season 1 and then they went on and did something totally different, but, like, you know, it would have been perfection. But again, it was just such a massive success that they were like, we need to do the same thing again. And as soon as you make that decision, then it all just starts to go downhill. So more originals, please. Stranger Things was a triumph, I feel. A triumph in originality that kind of, like, you know, had a knock-on effect. Let's commission more originals, please.
100%. Let's wrap it up.
Brilliant.
Sarah, at the end of a Fats on Film episode, we love to rate our episodes, our shows, our films, based on how well they represent fat bodies. And we like to rate them out of ourselves. So out of a potential 5 Sarahs, what will you give Stranger Things for fat representation?
I will give you 1 Sarah. Like,
you are so quick with that decision.
Yeah,
she was in.
You get one Sarah. I wouldn't even give them 1, but the combination of what they've been trying to do with Barb and with Sean Astin and with Bob and to an extent with Hopper and with Dustin's mum, even, like, as tiny as she plays, like, that comes to 1, and it's a point. And also, I have a tiny bit of hope. I'm usually very cynical, but I do have a little bit of hope. And again, I don't think it's the right decision to be led by the fans. But we did see almost an apology for making a mistake in the plot of season 1 and season 2. So that gives me hope that they are listening and learning. So that's what I'm going to give them. I'm going to give them 1 Sarah out of 5.
1 Sarah. Okay, I'm going to follow suit. I'm going to give it 1 Hannah. For the same reasons you've given. Like, you know what? I'm never going to be angry at seeing a fat plus size person on my screen. No, I take all day. What I don't like is when they don't give the time of day to one character and just kill her off, and then don't even make any of the cast seem to care that they killed her off. To the point, I will never ever get over the fact they hold an assembly for Will but not for Barb. That is disgusting.
That's so bad.
It's so bad. It's such an oversight. But I love the character of Bob as much as, like, he meets his very untimely end in the most graphic way possible. I think he has so many different layers. They actually give him quite a complex personality and character. We get to know a lot about him in, like, the 7 or 8 episodes he's in, which is awesome. Just hate that he died.
Yep.
And then with Hopper, like, yeah, I'm really happy this bigger guy who just feels real. Like, David Harbour feels real in that role. And he is a leader. He is a formidable force. And, you know, all credit to him. Love that. Hate how the weight loss story is being handled at the moment. So let's see what happens next season. But it really is, like, for all of them, it really is up and down. And I think for that, like, when I, checks and balances, it comes to one Hannah.
Yeah. When it kind of I love what they try to do, but at the same time, when you think about how big the cast actually is and how small the portion of people who are plus size in, I'm like, can't get any more. You can't get any more.
No, the representation percentage is poor. It could be better. They could absolutely be doing better.
Yeah.
Like, one of these characters could be fat. One of these central casts could be, and I don't mean dad-bod fat or thick or however we describe David Harbour. I mean big. I want some big people getting some money and having some screen time.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on this podcast. And I feel like you've guided me through Stranger Things, which I appreciate because I forgot so much of it. But I really appreciate your hand. I just really appreciate your insight. You've said some amazingly eloquent things just around representation and the tropes. And I can really feel your passion in this. And having another voice added to this conversation is no bad thing.
Thank you for having me. It's been so lovely.
It's been awesome. I absolutely adored this episode. Can you please let me and the listeners know where they can find you and more of your work?
Absolutely. So on my social media is kind of where I keep track of everything I'm working across film, television, and documentary. So you can find me at Sarah Grant Creative on Instagram, S Grant Creative on Twitter, or X, or whatever hellscape it is now. And on TikTok, you can find me at Fat Girl Best Friend, where I do little mini excerpts from my book and just these tiny little things about plus size people in film and television as well.
Perfect. And the links to Sarah's socials will be in the show notes below. And the listeners can find me at Queen Bee Says on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And they can also find the podcast at Fats on Film on Instagram and Twitter. And also, if you want, you can drop me an email. This is something I haven't added to the episode before, but you can drop me an email at fatsonfilm@outlook.com. Just let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have any recommendations of shows or TV. That's the same thing. Shows, TV, film, or any other media that you'd love us to discuss on this podcast. That would be super, super helpful. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And remember to stay fat.